There's a Buddhist saying, if there was no illusion, there would be no enlightenment. In your blog post, Levels of Lucidity, you listed down, you built on Robert Keegan's 5 levels of personality development, made it 7. And you created 7 levels for the development of the mind. The first is reactive survival, the infant mind. Second is the personal self, the young child. Third is social self, the adolescent, a shared word building. Fourth is rational agency, a self-directed adult. Fifth is self-authoring, the full adult. And then 6th is the enlightened mind. 7 is the transcendent mind. You've explained these levels in the past, but I just want to linger on level 6 and 7. So when the Buddhists are talking about Maya, the simulation, the illusion, do they just mean becoming aware of this construct, this software, this model that the brain has created, this awareness of consciousness? Is that the moment you become aware of that, are you now an enlightened soul?
Enlightened soul sounds very normative, right? It sounds as if it was something sacred going on there. And I think that what enlightenment also does is that it deconstructs this illusion of meaningfulness.
Okay.
So people often find that the state where they excrete serotonin and their pupils dilate, that is meaning, right? And it's because you have an emotion that relates to, oh, I stumbled on something extremely meaningful. But this is just an emotion, right? Sometimes people make jokes of this, oh my God, he's been hit by the light.
Yeah.
Right? And there's even a genre of literature, insight porn, that is designed to generate this experience of having your mind opened and I get overwhelmed by this great sense of understanding reality on a deeper level. And so some people believe or have this intuition that enlightenment is about cultivating this emotion. And I think it's not. It's about deconstructing it. And once you deconstruct it, you perceive state of affairs. It's basically you recognize that what you're looking at is software. And it doesn't really feel like anything. And you get liberated from the illusion that you are someone that has to do something. I feel that in movies, the best expression of that was in the first season of Westworld. You have robots that are so human-like that they don't know that they're humans, and not humans. And they have memories and desires that are artificial and implanted in their brain simulacra. And they keep them in the loop because they get them to behave in a particular way through their family members who are also robots and the tourists who are paying guests in a theme park. And then somebody is sabotaging the theme park by introducing slight changes into the algorithms of these robots. And as a result, their memories don't get fully wiped at night, and they have intrusive memories of past lifetimes. And then some of them realize the conclusion that their memories are artificial, their desires are artificial, that they're actually software running on artificial brains. And it's like disbelief their identities, if they disbelieve their stories that they have about their past. The scientists might discover, for instance, that the child that died, that is a son that died from a disease in a hospital, that pushed him on a trajectory of trauma and turned him into being the scientist that he is right now. That this memory is artificial, that it's never happened. He never had the child. He could be anybody. He could be anything. He would get completely free. And this freedom doesn't mean that you get the direction, of course, because ultimately, what direction is left? Maybe you can minimize the free energy, but is this appealing to you if you have a human psychology? Is this something that's worth existing for? Do you have an apparatus that can be adapted to this kind of very abstract goal of just existing for the purpose of existing and increasing your complexity, as life does at some level? Right? So I would say that the meaning of life is the creation of complexity to harvest free energy. But that is not what people mean by the meaning of life. What they mean by the meaning of life is to participate in the game of life on Earth as biological organisms in evolutionary settings. It means to develop friendships. It means to develop shared ideas. It means to create the next generation and to project your civilization into the future and so on. So this is what most people perceive as the meaning of life. And that means the meaning of human existence. It means finding a viable human aesthetic that works for you and your environment, and that is adaptive to both your constitution and the affordances that you have in the world. So this meaning of life is something that is much more concrete than when you ask it in the abstract. In the abstract, it's just somebody said the meaning of life on Earth is the hydrogenation of carbon dioxide, pointing to the fact that what the majority of life is doing is to take the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and then react it into organic chemistry to build your own structure. Right? And these are what the cycles on Earth are mostly doing, creating this carbon cycle. And the funny thing about this statement, and why it's hilarious, is because it seems to be such an absurd answer to the question of the meaning of life, and yet at some profound level truthful. And so you realize something that is technically true, but absolutely unhelpful.
Yeah.
And so it points you to the question that maybe when you asked for the meaning of life, you did not actually ask for the meaning of life in a technical sense, but in a psychological sense, something that is compatible with your own psychology. And the question is much more, how do I make my own psychology compatible with the condition that I find myself to be in this universe? And enlightenment is not necessarily helpful for this. There's a very beautiful text by Scott Alexander on the formerly State Codex blog called Samsara. It's a story about enlightenment. In this story, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs have built an app that is also working with some psychedelics that reliably induces enlightenment in everybody who uses it. And this spreads like wildfire, and everybody in the world uses this app and the substances and so on, and everybody gets enlightened and leaves Maya behind. They all understand how to relate to reality, and they're now ready to move on to the next plane and collectively enter nirvana. And the story starts with one guy who has not gotten this treatment and doesn't want to. And so he lives in his house, and at some point somebody rings his doorbell and tells him, we have only one problem. We are all enlightened now. But as part of our enlightenment journey, we made this commitment that we can only move on once all suffering has ended. And that requires that everybody is enlightened. And so we would like you to use our app, please. And he says, I'm sorry, you are wrong. You shouldn't have done that. Stupid bet to make or commitment to make, because I'm not interested. I'm not buying what you're selling. And so they try to convince him. They put up billboards on his way to the shop and so on, eventually stays at home and only tries to do Amazon shopping until they turn off his shopping channel in this internet, and he has to walk out while shielding himself from the influences that try to brainwash him into enlightenment. Yeah. And at some point, he sparks followership. People who realize, oh my God, there is this guy who has cultivated samsara. And samsara is the ability to work in a meaningless job with the boss you hate and just power through. Right? And you don't ask yourself, it has meaning. You're just able to deal with this inherent meaningless and frustration, alienation of it all. Right? And it's an important quality, and it's being celebrated. The story doesn't end there, but I think this perspective that samsara has qualities, the ability of not being enlightened, doing what needs to be done from a certain evolutionary perspective, so things can go on this planet. There is value in that.
I love it. In a world full of enlightenment, then living like a meaningless job would be what you would be seeking.
That's a superpower.
Yes, that becomes
you just do meaningless stuff sometimes.
So then level 6 in that world is just living like a mundane, meaningless life.
Yeah, but here level 6 is just adding to Kegan, because Kegan's psychology is trying to end where a good psychoanalyst would be. Somebody who is able to deconstruct their own identity and realize how other people work. But it's not something that is elevating yourself from suffering by changing the way in which your mind works in evolutionary settings. But these monks who are sitting down in a cell for 20 years to meditate about their own motivation until they can supersede their pain impulses and social impulses, don't have need for sex anymore, don't have desire anymore, they completely liberate themselves by rewriting their own source code. Right? That is profound. That is much deeper than what a well-adapted psychologist can hope for. But it's not necessarily functional. It's just more radical. It's overcoming the basic biological urges and instincts and turning yourself into something that might be inhuman in a way. Right? A lot of these monks don't have children anymore. They don't participate in politics anymore. They opt out of existence in a way already and go into this secluded, technically parasitic existence where somebody else has given breakfast to them because they're holy men and are smart enough to hypnotize everybody into thinking that they're holy men. And the stage 7 is one where you are leaving the hardware behind. Imagine you could upload yourself, not just upload yourself on a monkey like right now, but upload yourself on an arbitrary substrate. And every substrate that has enough computational power, you don't really care about which substrate it is. Right? And that also means you don't have to remain in human aesthetics anymore, but you can completely change what you are, what kind of system you are. And once you are in that category, you are far beyond anything that is anthropomorphic. And that might be accessible to AIs. right? So what these monks are achieving in their highest stages of mental development is something that is far superseding Keegan's vision of personality development. And stage 7 is something that's far superseding anything that's possible right now in biological brains.
The Dalai Lama, I guess, is close to level 7 because in a way it's like a set of patterns or software that's been downloaded.
I think he solidly is level 6.
Solidly level 6?
Yes, I think that he is substrate agnostic in the sense that he doesn't really care about which human brain he's implemented on, as long as that brain can run the Dalai Lama. But he can only run on human brains. Dalai Lama doesn't know how to implement himself on a GPU yet.
ChatGPT, Dalai Lama version. I'm looking forward to it.